with only 3 weeks to go until the general election, BBC Breakfast has invited the leaders of the 7 main political parties to speak to us here on the sofa.
So about an hour ago, we spoke to Reform UK's Nigel Farage. Now we're joined by the leader of Plaid Cymru, Rhun at Iorwerth. You know what? Got it right before, didn't we? And I know, and never mind. I apologise.
No need.
You're enjoying this election campaign?
Very much so. I've got enough energy, thankfully, and you need energy for an election campaign like this. Where are we? Halfway through?
One day after halfway, yeah.
We are. But it's about making the most of those opportunities to talk about the kind of vision that I have for Wales, and whether it's joining you on the sofa here or a 7-party debate last night. You know, they're tough. I expect tough questioning, but just having that platform, the opportunity to talk about the kind of Wales that I think it could be.
When you talk about Plaid Cymru's role in the general election and where it could be in Wales, what is a realistic expectation in terms of governance, in terms of Plaid Cymru's influence and governance in Wales?
Influence is the key word.
OK, because that's very different to the number of seats.
We're not going to be forming the next UK government, so it's about how we use influence. And I think in this election, perhaps it's clearer than in any election for a while what that specific role is for Plaid Cymru in the election. I think we can be fairly sure that Sir Keir Starmer will become the Prime Minister in 3 weeks' time. Conservatives, at long last, will be kicked out of power, but Labour will need to be kept very, very firmly to account. And Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister regardless of what Wales says. So we in Wales, I think it's true for the rest of the UK, I'll look at it from a Welsh perspective, can try to mould the kind of change that's going to happen in this election. And making sure that Labour are kept honest, if you like, kept in check is going to be very, very important, especially with that likelihood that it may be quite a big majority for Labour. If the danger, what we see quite often, is that Labour overlook Wales's needs. Plaid Cymru MPs there at Westminster make sure that Wales can't be ignored.
So this leads quite nicely into the idea that you want to cut the current way that Wales receives funding from Westminster. OK, have you had a conversation, or do you have an idea of how the Labour Party, as you're assuming it will come into power, is planning for this? Because at the moment, we've got the Barnett formula, which is kind of complicated to explain, but Wales receives a certain percentage of funding. Do you think the Labour Party would be open to changing that?
Problem we have is that Labour doesn't seem to want to engage with it, even though...
So that's a no.
But Labour colleagues of Keir Starmer in Wales agree with us that there needs to be a review of the way Wales is funded. But what we have is a situation where Labour won't make the case at Westminster for change. They listen to Keir Starmer saying, no, we're not going to address this, and then they be quiet. We can't afford to have MPs from Wales being quiet. And this election, we're seeing the number of MPs from Wales being cut from 40 to 32, 20% fewer. So Wales's voice is being diminished anyway. And if Labour MPs from Wales won't stand up to Keir Starmer on that issue of fair funding, what we're asking for, by the way, is to change that Barnett's formula, outdated, Barnett himself agreed it was outdated, into a needs-based formula, where the Treasury decides what are Wales's needs and funds us accordingly. If Labour won't make that call, we need Plaid Cymru MPs at Westminster, at the heart of decision-making there, to make the pitch.
If you take on the needs-based formula, we have spoken to the IFS and looked at what the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, says, and actually, if you took on that system, it wouldn't necessarily mean more funding for Wales.
Every study that we have seen suggests that there would be a fairer funding mechanism for Wales. For example, making sure that we have the money available for investment in public services. Devolution of policing, for example, which we want, would actually mean more money coming in for the delivery of policing and justice in Wales. So pretty much all the estimates from the...
Well, I just want to kind of be clear for the balance on this. The IFS says that Wales receives around 20% more for devolved services than is spent on comparable services in England. So that's just what the IFS is saying.
But it's not that straightforward either, because different parts of England have different funding settlements. London actually gets more money per head than Wales, so it's not a sort of a black and white situation. We have some of the poorest communities in the UK in Wales. The legacy of deindustrialisation, that is why the need is higher and why Treasury needs to reflect that in the way it makes its decisions. And people watching this in parts of England will also be looking to that and making sure that Treasury has to recognise what those needs are.
Why have you stopped talking about independence?
We haven't.
Well, it's not in any of your literature or in your manifesto. Is that correct?
It was pointed out to me yesterday that it was on page 42 and page 1 of our manifesto. So yes, it's on page 1 of the manifesto, it's clear to me. I've always believed it all my life that we won't be able to reach fully our potential as a nation until we have all the levers of change in our hands. But this isn't an election about independence. It's an election about making sure that within the context that we're in now, within the UK, Wales has a fair crack at the whip. That is my role as the leader of Plaid Cymru. And when we call for fair funding so that we can provide fairness for the NHS, fairness for families and communities in Wales, that's the key message. But I never take my eyes off that prize in the end for Wales. Should we be ready to embrace it? It's my job to get more people interested in it, of taking those powers into our own hands.
It is true that it's become diluted, though. That would be fair. I'm just looking, and absolutely, I'm just checking. Obviously, you know your own manifesto inside out. Manifesto now promising a consultation on the path to independence, not a referendum within 5 years, which is something you talked about in 2021. So that is clearly that's a step back. In any kind of analysis, yes?
I don't believe it is, and the reason I say that is that the timescale is in the hands of the people of Wales. I would dearly love Wales to become independent tomorrow, but what matters is not what I think, but what the people of Wales think. And my job as the leader of Plaid Cymru and my party colleagues is to bring people of Wales with us, arm around the shoulders, take them by the hand, whatever you want to call it, and get them interested in what the potential might be. There was a report published recently, government commissioned, the Independent Commission on the Constitutional Future of Wales, chaired by eminent political scientist Professor Laura McAllister and the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rhun Williams. And they made it very, very clear. Independence is a perfectly viable option for the future of Wales. We have to see how that works, what people feel about the risks and what they feel about the rewards. And what the report said was that there are very real risks in our current situation. And in fact, they're not risks. They're the reality of being unable to remove the shackles of child poverty, unable to move on from the economic stagnation that's held Wales back. Wales could be better than this.
Can I ask you, in your party leader role, and you mentioned the debate that took place last night, a lot of people looking in on the general election debate as a whole are saying it feels very personal. There are party leaders accusing each other of lying. There are party leaders accusing each other of a lack of trust. Nigel Farage, who was on this sofa with us an hour ago, said, for example, he is more patriotic than you. He said, than all the party leaders. What do you make of the tone around? And you are front and centre. You're a party leader.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, and politics shouldn't be about personalising in that way. But of course, we as politicians have values, have policies that we would like to implement, and we should be held to account according to the language we use, the values that we uphold, and so on. What I'll always try to do is focus on the outcomes, focus on what we're trying to achieve. Some people may like the way that I approach politics, some people won't. And sadly, in this world of social media, yes, you do experience enough hate from people who see the world in a different way.
Sorry, you haven't quite addressed the point that I'm making, which is about even in amongst the party leaders, there are things being said now that possibly we haven't seen quite in the same way before. And I'm not sure how conscious you are of that and how that makes what effect that has.
Yeah, I'll reflect on what you say. I mean, I as a political journalist for 20 years before going into politics, I studied fairly closely, I guess, as you do, how people speak to each other, and I'll consider what you say. But all I'll say is this: I like to base what I do and the way I act in politics on respect. There are people, including Nigel Farage, who I disagree with vehemently, but we have to keep political discourse respectful, and it's something that's important to me. But that doesn't mean that you can't be very, very firm on opinions and policies upheld by other people that you don't think are in the best interest of the people that you serve.
Is he more patriotic than you? Nigel
about
Farage.
Wales?
Is he more patriotic than you?
About Wales, we have a very different
We're in the general
viewpoint.
election campaign.
Well, Pat, I don't view the UK and Britain in the same way as Nigel Farage do. My love for my country, Wales, my belief in giving everything that I possibly have to seek the best for the people of Wales, in partnership with our friends in other parts of the UK, in England and Scotland, and way beyond. You know, that's what drives me. But maybe it's not the easiest of analogies between Nigel Farage and myself, perhaps.
Understood. We're very glad that you've been joining us on the sofa this morning. Thank you so much.
Good to be here. Thank you both.
Rhun, Iorwerth, thank you very much for joining us.